I thank His Majesty the King, because we worked for many, many years with his father, and we work with many, many traditional leaders. Today is the traditional leaders in the province, but it's traditional leaders throughout the country, because they are part of our culture and our history. And we want to thank our religious and faith-based leaders as well who are with us today. And they will be part of this committee with a few people that will be appointed by the mayor, because they know where the problems are, as well as the premier. So the emergency from our side is to start releasing those funds as quickly as possible, so that, you know, tomorrow, the day thereafter, many of our people who are in this hall and in other parts of the province can really start accessing those funds and improving their living conditions, and try and find their feet and deal with the pain, so that all of us can help to make things better.
Mr. Motsepe, you know, we are talking about the ramifications of climate change and the coordination of this entire relief efforts. And one of the calls that I think a lot of people have been making, because of the mistrust that citizens have with the government, is that some of the monies be given directly to organizations such as the Gift of the Givers. Would you be inclined to do something like that? What is your sense, having interacted with the KwaZulu-Natal government, on their hold of this situation, against the backdrop we know that this is of a magnitude that no one could have ever imagined?
No, what you're saying is very important, but this is funds from the Family Foundation, and we have emphasized that it should be released as quickly as possible. And we've got processes in place for purposes of governance. And the most important thing for us is to make sure that the money really goes to those of our community members who need it the most. So the advantage from foundations like ours and many others, and I'm pleased that the government also is emphasizing not just compliance to governance because of the problems and the lack of confidence that has arisen because of the problems of the past, but Dr. Precious has identified 2 people from the Motsepe Foundation who are part of this committee, and they are there to work with the religious and faith-based leaders who are part of that, as well as the traditional leaders who are also included there, and various other stakeholders, so that they can move forward and release the funds as quickly as possible.
Dr. Precious, thank you for your indulgence. Perhaps I'd want to get to know from you what your focus will be in terms of women and children who would be the most adversely affected by these floods.
We know that in crises, it's usually the most vulnerable in our communities, you know, the poor, the marginalized, the majority of whom are women and children. And as we went around assessing the extent of the damage, in most of the places that we stopped, it was women and children who had gathered, you know, in the places of safety. So as we work with the committee that has been appointed through the Motsepe Foundation, we will ensure that there is a balance in how the funds get to the people, that you know, it gets to those who are most needy, and we address issues of water, sanitation. We have actually been working with putting up boreholes and JoJo's in the area, so we know, we've worked with a lot of people around here who know where the issues are. As a foundation, we always work with the community, so it keeps us very close to the people who are most, you know, at risk and who are needy. So I'm comfortable that we will be able to achieve, you know, address issues of children as well as the youth. But I just want to add on the question that you added of climate change, which Mr. Motsepe has you know, mentioned. It's a global issue, but what is important in terms of how we move forward globally with the issue of climate change is that outside of the carbon credits that people talk about, the fund for rehabilitation and assisting communities that are impacted by climate change should be directed to places like this. We saw this in Mozambique with the cyclones. We're seeing this in eThekwini, in Natal, with the floods. Funding should also be directed towards the rehabilitation, relocation of people who are often not the ones that brought about the climate change. The rich nations, as we know, often would be contributing more towards climate change. So whatever funding comes about, some of it should be directed towards the rehabilitation of people that are displaced because of these fires and floods and earthquakes.
Very quickly from my side, last one. After doing your assessments here today, do you get a sense that our government is in tune and forward thinking in terms of its planning for infrastructure for climate change? We've had floods in 2017, 2019, it's 2022, and the magnitude and impact increases every time, and yet we're finding a situation where there's still houses being built in low-lying areas, etc. If you look at the bridges, they were built in the 60s. So in terms of the new infrastructure that's going to be onboarded and what you saw today, are you getting a sense that we are on track with what is being spoken about across the globe?
Just one quick issue to add, and then she will.
Oh, okay.
We were in San Francisco a few weeks ago, and we remembered there was a time when we had a meeting with people from Silicon Valley, and we were in a building, and the building was vibrating because they had earth tremors, and in fact in 1904, 1905 they had a huge earth tremor where thousands of people lost their lives. But they have got regulations and legal requirements so that if you build houses and you build infrastructure, you build them in a manner that when the earth tremor takes place, they can, to a large extent, deal with those challenges. And worldwide, even in South Africa, we are going to have problems of climate change for many, many years to come. And that's why the question that you raise is absolutely fundamental. The developing countries have a limitation as far as resources are concerned. So you need funds, you need finance to make sure that the bridges, the roads, and the housing projects that are implemented take place in areas where if you've got droughts like these, you will not have loss of life. So I must say, I was really impressed. I saw Nkosazana walk for kilometers. I saw Begitele walk for kilometers because we could not use cars in those areas. And really, and I saw the premier, it gave me some degree of pride because you could see the commitment, you could see the passion, and just the recognition that there's a duty to make a difference. And because, in the private sector, it doesn't matter what we say, we are judged by our results and what we do. So, and I've got no doubt that government as well recognizes that there's a need for real urgency in terms of, if you look at how the government performed in the last election, I think there's a realization that there's a lot of urgent work that has to be done, and to make sure that the performance on the ground really is in line with the expectations of the problem of the people, and to make living conditions much better for all our people. But climate change, she spoke about the funds. We talk with the top companies and the top governments in the world, and there's a lot of good commitment, but good commitments alone will not result in the sort of preparatory infrastructure development that should take place. No developing country has the resources on its own. It's a global partnership because climate change is indeed a global problem. And I think Dr. Precious was correct that if you look historically and if you even look today, I'm from the mining industry, And the mining industry has been a huge polluter. And that's why we've had to take far-reaching steps to make sure, we are part of the International Council of Mining and Metals, and part of the focus there is to make sure that our industry contributes significantly to dealing with CO2 emissions and introduces the measures to counter the big challenges we have and the problems we're experiencing because of climate change. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for the wonderful work you people do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
That is Patrice Motsepe and Dr. Patrice Motsepe. They're basically wrapping up after donating about 30 million rands in terms of helping the flood victims in KwaZulu-Natal. Fortunately, I've been saying that communication and the network has been failing us. We won't be able to communicate any further because we've been cut off. This area of Nazareth, Wandengezi, Maran Hill, Pinetown and others across the province have been badly affected by the network issue or the signal. So we'll have to take it back to the studio.